For those of you that know me will know that I don't usually need a mic. And it is lovely to see so many of you here today. And I think all of us will say that it's kind of really good to see the people who we know and who we've talked about these things in the past. It's terrific to have people we don't know who are also kind of joining what we hope will be an interesting and successful movement which will overthrow all sorts of dreadful oppressive regimes, which I can't name specifically so I'll get told off. I would encourage you to tweet if you're on, well, you should be on Twitter because that's where all the cool kids hang out, really. But all this stems from Twitter. 2 years ago, most of us who were involved in this didn't know each other from Adam. Everything that's led up to today, and everything that's occurring with Walk the Talk, comes directly from social media. It's fantastic. It's the most democratic way, really, of kind of linking with people, of making things happen across wide geographical spaces. So please do get involved, and do come and talk to us. And hopefully, today we'll kind of leave you all brimming with enthusiasm and hope and interesting ideas. But I am here to introduce our first speaker, Jamie Hughes. Jamie is president of the BPS. He's a clinical psychologist, he's a neuropsychologist, he's a psychotherapist, and much of his career has been spent working as a military psychologist. He's worked as a very senior civil servant. He's done an enormous amount of international work relating to psychological support of people in the armed forces. And he's also been involved in the formulation of international plans for crisis, disaster and emergency management. He's also director of the Veterans and Families Institute at Anglia Ruskin, and he's been involved in providing psychological support to humanitarian operations in the Ukraine and in Nepal. I'm not going to steal Jamie's thunder too much, but he's going to talk about some of his experience, but also about his aims for his tenure as BPS president, and how he plans to make psychology more visible, more clearly heard, and to increase the impact we as psychologists have on policy and practice, as well as making the BPS more accessible, more transparent, more equal, more diverse, and more efficient. So without further ado, Jamie Hughes.
Well, hi everybody. I'm Jamie, and I'm a psychologist. That's actually very much the superordinate theme for my year as president. We are all psychologists. I happen to be a clinical psychologist. I happen to be a clinical neuropsychologist. We are all psychologists. Perhaps not everyone in this room, but a lot of us are, or training to be one, or in an assistant psychologist role, or whatever. There are nearly 55,000 psychologists in the society. If we all recruited one extra member, there would be over 100,000. That would be huge. And actually, probably there are an equal number of psychologists working in the country who aren't members of the BPS. My aim is to change that. I've been a paid-up BPS member, well, student subscriber ever since I went back to uni when I was 30, and BPS member ever since. And I was never involved in BPS politics. I just was a member. I read my clinical psychology forum. I got frustrated about how introspective we've been as a profession over all that time. There's lots of very good stuff about training and supervision and, assessment and selection. But actually, if you were to do an analysis, I'm sure, of the content, far more of it's been inward-looking than outward-looking, I would like to say, in forum. And Steve and the current editorial team are obviously, definitely changing that. And the previous people, Craig Nunes and the late Mark Rapley and others led the way as well. So when I'm asked the question about what's the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist, I say at least 30,000 quid a year, and we have to buy our own pens, mugs and post-its. That normally gets a laugh. It's true, unfortunately. But talking about psychiatrists, some of my best friends are psychiatrists, they really are. I've known Simon Wesley, Sir Simon, Professor Sir Simon, the esteemed president of the Royal College of Psychologists, since we were both about 18. He's a neighbour now, I've worked for him. The Royal College of Psychiatrists has got a membership of 15,000. Okay? We've got a membership of nearly 60,000. So why is it that when we turn on our radio in the morning and we listen to the Today programme, normally, who do we hear? I'm not going to say anything rude about psychiatrists, they're lovely people, they do a really valuable job, we work well together, but you're far more likely to hear a psychiatrist commenting than a psychologist. And that's why I set up a little campaign a few years ago called A Campaign for a Royal College of Psychologists. Now, the campaign's still running. The reason that I set it up wasn't because I'm a great monarchist. I'm not. I mean, happy birthday to Duke of Edinburgh the other day. Fantastic. The Queen, amazing. I'm not a great monarchist. But actually, there's this thing called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is actually the words that we use determine the way that we think about things. And actually, if you say, I'm the Royal College of Psychologists, gosh, wow, really, gosh. What are you? I'm in the British Psychological Society. Okay, right, fine. So the words we use are important. And apart from the words, because actually the words don't matter, and we're doing this big review of our member network, which it isn't my review, it's not my baby. I just said that I'd take it on and run with it for 3 years when I got elected as President-elect. The words in that member network review, it talks about colleges and faculties and divisions and things. The words aren't actually, the words in the review aren't really important. What is important is that we end up with words which actually carry gravitas and give a sense of purpose to what we do. Anyway, so back to the Royal College of Psychiatrists. So 15,000 members. How many, so that's a quarter of our size. How many times, by what factor do you think that their PR, policy and communications budget exceeds ours? Any guesses? 300%. Lower. Oh, 300%. Higher. Much higher. If we're doing everything in percentages, much higher.
1,200.
Higher.
2,000.
Lower.
There are other numbers.
Lower. Don't monopolise on the numbers. Lower. 1,600. Their PR and publicity and comms budget is 16 times the BPS's. So therefore, that means that effectively, their sort of PR machine is sort of 64 times per person more effective than that. So it's no wonder, is it, that actually psychologists don't get their voice out. And we'll talk about the international stuff. There are going to be slides, there are going to be exciting slides. I brought along this really trendy thing which the Division of Neuropsychology gave me. It's a wristband, white wristband, it's got a USB stick in it, and it has crashed 2 computers already. So there will be no pictures. And I'm going to have words with Peter Rankin, the chair of the Division of Neuropsychology, later about his not very good gadgets. So there'll be no. I will get on to the international stuff. But first of all, so the Royal College, it wasn't about the words. I just really felt, as after the 20 years as a paid-up clinical psychologist, paying my fees, asking the question, which many of you ask, what the heck am I getting for my money? And the answer is lots of things. There are lots of things. There's CPD, there's not registration anymore because the HCPC have got that, but there's CPD, and there are journals, and there are faculties and divisions and special groups and special interest groups and all those good things. But in terms of having an organisation to really speak out for us and to enable us to speak out and to encourage us to speak out, I think the BPS has been sadly lacking. Okay? And so the Royal College campaign was about trying to say, look, we want something that's different, we want something that's more visible, we want something that's more vocal, we want something that's more effective. We want, actually, that when there's a standing committee in the Houses of Parliament, we want psychologists there. When there are people on Panorama, we want psychologists there. When there are people speaking out in the pages of broadsheets and the tabloids, we want psychologists there. You know, because there's an awful lot of us, and we've got a lot to say. And the whole reason that we aren't psychiatrists, and that we do get paid 30, 40, whatever it is, £1,000 less a year, and we have to buy our own pens and mugs and post-its, is that actually we're different, and we've come at this from a different route. And a lot of us have come because we believe really, really strongly in social justice and doing all that we can to eliminate inequality and unfairness. That's why, and that's very much a psychological way of being. I'm really proud of that, and I hope you are too. Which sort of brings me on to the next thing, actually. I'm wearing a badge. I've taken my BPS badge off, and I put another badge on. And if you can't see it at the back, it's a smiley face with a little tear on it. And what this smiley face and little tear badge, it's the logo of a new campaign which started on Twitter, where you're right, everything happens on Twitter. It is where all the cool kids hang out. And it's called the Only Us campaign. And what it says is, there is no them, there's no us, there's only us. So, and so that applies to psychological distress. I don't like talking about mental illness. I don't like talking about psychiatric disorders. I prefer talking about psychological distress. There are people who are psychologically distressed, and there are people who aren't. And sometimes, actually usually, they're the same people. Yeah, a lot of the time, the people who are psychologically distressed are also the very same people who other times aren't psychologically distressed. And those people who are acutely psychologically distressed usually aren't acutely psychologically distressed the whole time. They might go through an episode of being acutely distressed, and a lot of the time they're not. Yesterday, I'm very pleased to be president of the Cardiff branch of the Samaritans, for various family reasons, really. My mum was a Samaritan, and she left me some money, and they kindly asked my brother and I if we'd like to be joint presidents. And I was there last night, and there's a very good woman from, she's a woman GP who was working for the Welsh equivalent of NHS England, called Anne John, speaking a lot of stigma. And then there's a really great guy called Luke Young, very, very Welsh he was, from the valleys, from Blaenau Gwent. And he was the policy officer of Stonewall in Cathedral Road. And he was just speaking about his whole process of coming out. And the fact that as a gay person you come out not just once, but twice, but actually every day you keep on coming. He was fantastic. So the whole theme last night ended up being stigma. And the Only Us campaign is very much an anti-stigma campaign. And it's something I feel personally very strongly about. So I'm going to come out now. I'm not gay, as it happens. I'm heterosexual and married with a kid. But I have been taking lithium for the last 20 years. And when I started training as a clinical psychologist, I was fine. I'd moods that went up and down a bit. And then about sort of 5 years in, 5 years after, 5 years working in the NHS actually. If I'm honest, 5 years working in a CMHT with massive caseloads, severe depression, childhood sexual abuse, borderline, etc., PTSD. I got a bit depressed, well, very depressed, suicidally depressed, actually, ish, which wasn't helped by some of these pills that you have to take. Seroxat, don't recommend it. Then you feel very funny indeed. And then I got put on an MAOI, good old-fashioned monoamine oxidase inhibitor, got better. Next year it happened again. Got put back on the MAOIs, got better. Told my psychiatrist my mood was going up. Please could I stop taking the pills? And, well, he didn't take me off the pills, and I went bonkers, very bonkers. But, luckily, thanks to the wonders of thyroidazine, within a week, it was sorted. My hypomanic episode was sorted, and I went for a selection board to be a senior civil servant psychologist with the Ministry of Defence, and passed. And put it all on my form, and said, are you suffering from any mental and psychiatric disorders? Yes, got bipolar disorder. So that's why I really have got a personal issue about stigma, and I think, I'm sorry about this, apologise for it. I don't apologise at all. I think it's really important actually to speak out, about this, just in exactly the same way that you would, if people thought you were wearing, an outrageous T-shirt and they wanted to know why you're wearing it, you say, well, I'm wearing this T-shirt because X, Y, and Z. But this is who I am. So campaign for Royal College of Psychiatrists. It had 1,000 members. It was doing really well. We were putting in submissions to the Board of Trustees for the British Psychological Society to get them to change their charter. It all actually became sort of impossible, really. And then one day, the psychologist, which, as I said, I'd been taking for numerous years, came out of its plastic packet and dropped open on a page which said, nominations sought for President-elect, President 2015-2016. And I suddenly thought, I could do that. I'm at a stage of my career when I could do it. I want to do it. I might be able to change things or help change things or start changing things. So I'll give it a go. So what I said to the people on the campaign was, look guys, you're going to have to keep the pressure up from the outside. I'm going to have to sort of take myself off the campaign now because, conflict of interest and all that stuff. And I'll push the change on the inside. So what's happening is that, as I said, the previous BPS president had actually started coming up with a strategic plan and sort of reorganising the society to deliver on that. And it had already been decided that we were going to look at how the society was structured. So at my first board meeting, it was obvious this was going to be a 3-year process, and I said, I'm a rookie board member, I need to get to know the society and how it works and everyone in it, so I'll do it. Anyway, so that's the end of that. We are in the middle of a consultation at the moment, which closes on July the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. If you're a member, please wade through the rather dull consultation form. Fit it in. I stood for president. I stood against someone called Christina Richards, who is a transgender psychologist, who's going to be representing us as a special NHS England meeting on transgender issues. And I ended up as president-elect. Now, it's really strange. When you apply to be president-elect, there's a ballot that goes out with some words in it. You aren't allowed to campaign, okay? So this is my campaign speech, okay? It's a bit late. This is my campaign speech. Between the lines, what I wanted to say was the things that Massima read out earlier on. I want us to be more vocal. I want us to be more visible. I want us to have more impact. And I want the whole BPS. Again, I don't want the BPS. A lot of people talk about the BPS as being them and us. Even within the DCP, we talk about the BPS, as if it was sort of orbiting somewhere, we are the BPS. Well, if you remember, you are anyway. And if you're not, please join. We are the BPS. All of us could be the BPS. So anything that goes wrong with the BPS is actually down to us. So, and at the moment, it is perceived as them and us. It's perceived as inaccessible. It's perceived as opaque. It's perceived as being obstructive. It's perceived as as being slow, inefficient, slow to react, and it needn't be. So, what are we doing about it? Well, the current presidential team, which is Dot Mill was president last year, so she becomes vice president. Peter Kinderman, who's professor of clinical psychology at Liverpool, he is president-elect. And we decided right from the word go that we were going to nail our colours to the mast, and we were going to speak out about what we believed in. So I was going to read you about what we said, and my phone's over here. So this is what we said. It so happened, just straight after the president's changeover conference, and straight after conference, as it happened, it was Mental Health Awareness Week. And this is what we said. It's a long statement, and it's not all about UK issues, a lot of it's about international issues. It's to mark Mental Health Awareness Week 2015. Professor Hughes, President of BPS, Professor Dorothy Mill, Vice President, Professor Peter Kinderman, President-elect, called on the government to recognise the impact of war, poverty, social divisions, inequity, and the abuse of fundamental human rights on our psychological health, and to do all that it can to combat these evils. This was, of course, just after the election, when we knew it was going to be a majority Tory government. As we begin Mental Health Awareness Week, we call on the government to recognise the impact of war, poverty, social divisions, inequity, and the abuse of fundamental human rights on our psychological health, and to work together to protect citizens' mental health through addressing these problems. Too many people, especially women and children, are traumatised by war and armed conflict. We must work actively for peace, and we must extend both humanitarian care and the hand of friendship to people escaping from conflict zones. We know that our psychological health and well-being are largely dependent on our social circumstances. Especially in this period of economic austerity, we must work collectively to create a more humane society, to reduce or eliminate poverty, especially childhood poverty, and to reduce financial and social inequality. We need to work harder to promote peace, social justice and equity, and ensure that citizens are properly fed, housed, educated, and living in a sustainable natural ecosystem. To promote genuine mental health and well-being, we need to protect and promote universal human rights, as enshrined in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because experiences of neglect, rejection and abuse are hugely important in the genesis of many problems. We need to redouble our efforts to protect children from emotional, psychological, physical, sexual abuse and neglect. Equally, we must protect both adults and children from bullying and discrimination, whether that's racism, homophobia, or discrimination based on sexuality, gender, disability, mental health, or any other characteristic. We can all do more to combat discrimination and promote a more tolerant and accepting society. Now, that statement went out, it's not a BPS statement, but it went out as a statement from the team, okay? And we've done one again yesterday, because there's an article in the BMJ recently by Lynn Friedley about the plans, the supposed plans of the DWP, Department of Work and Pensions, to employ armies of psychologists to basically enforce therapy on people who choose not to work, which is absolutely immoral and absolutely wrong. And I'm just waiting for a tweet or a message back from our press office to say that it's gone online. It should be going online this morning sometime. Now again, that's a presidential statement. We put out a BPS statement the other day about the work capability assessment. You know that the job centres use this ridiculous thing, work capability assessment. It's unreliable, it's not valid, it's not properly normed, it's not properly tested, all things that we psychologists learn about. It's administered by people who aren't trained properly, it's interpreted by people who aren't trained properly, who aren't supervised. So we put out a statement, and it's on the website, and the press didn't really pick it up for whatever reason. just to say, as a society, we think this is rubbish. As psychologists, we know how to do this stuff. Ask us about it, and we'll help you to get it right. And we're going to be doing a lot more of that, actually. We're going to be doing a lot more. I would very much like the statement that Dr. Peter and I put out at the beginning of May to actually become a BPS statement about our beliefs. That would be really, really good. Tanya isn't here. I wish she was, for all sorts of reasons. Tanya is absolutely wonderful about speaking about psychology in the public domain. House of Tiny Terrorways, obviously she's now a Times journalist. She's a professor. She's a professor at Edge. She's the Chancellor at Edge Hill. So she can speak out with authority. She does it really well. She does it in a very accessible way. But she's able to tread that fine line because yes, she's a psychologist, and yes, she's a clinical psychologist, but she's not speaking on behalf of the BPS. She's speaking as Tanya Myron, child psychologist, Times journalist, and can say lots of really important things. But I just think it would be really, really good if there were more of us who were just out there tweeting, absolutely tweet. If you heard the radio this morning, you would have heard that actually Twitter's going down the pan and it's rubbish compared to Facebook. Well, at the moment, it is where all the cool kids hang out. This is where we're organising all this sort of stuff, so don't leave Twitter yet. But if you're on Facebook as well, then please put this stuff on Facebook. Just put it out there. Write about it, blog about it. You don't have to speak on behalf of your organisation. You can just speak as yourself, as a psychologist. If you're offered the opportunity of interviews on local radio, go for it. If you're offered the opportunity of interviews on television, go for it. The society will support you. I for one, will definitely support you. We need to be out there. So we need to be in the media. We need to be in politics. We've got a clinical psychologist MP now. Dr. Lisa Cameron is the MP for East Kilbride, Strathnaven and Les Mahago. I think sounds like something in the Wild West, but it's in Scotland apparently. Peter Kinderman and Richard Pemberton and I met with her at the House of Commons last week. She's offered to support us in all sorts of ways to get psychology mentioned in debates, to get psychology mentioned in questions, to sponsor events for us, and in return, I've really been given her so much information to ask to put into questions just within her first couple of weeks. We've also got 3 other, she's a SNP MP, we've got 3 other Labour MPs who I've also been in touch with, who've also got psychology degrees, either first or postgrad degrees or doctorates. They're all up for it as well. They're up for really supporting us and giving us that voice in Parliament so that we can have a voice on standing committees. I'm really pleased that I was asked by Paul Farmer, who's the Chief Executive of Mind. He did a really good interview this morning, I don't know if you heard it on the radio, talking about the CQC report, talking about how rubbish sort of psychiatric provision is out of hours. And he was on with, what's his name? Paul Lelliot of the CQC. Simon Stevens, who's the Chief Executive of NHS England. NHS England produced this 5-year forward view thing. And NHS England asked Paul Farmer to chair a mental health task force. It's had 2 meetings already. I went to the first one. Julia Falconbridge, who chairs the Division of Clinical Psychology's Children and Young People's Faculty, went to the second one. Richard Pemberton is going to go to the third one, and I'm going to go to the last one. But we're there. We're actually there at the table where we should be. There's a group of people called a policy group. Mind, rethink, time to change. We're not on it. Why the heck aren't we on it? We should be on it. We will be on it. Because as psychologists, we need to be there. So we need to be speaking. We need to be more visible. We need to be more vocal. We need to be speaking out in the media, in the press, in the social media. We need to be having an impact, and we need not to be afraid, actually, of speaking out. In our trusts, in our NHS trusts, in our universities, you know, if there are issues which we as psychologists, or we just as individuals who happen to be psychologists, have got a view on, it's time to come out of the box. Anne Cook, who, together, I mean, I must pay huge tribute to Steve Weatherhead, who organised today. He's really leading from the front in this charge to get clinical psychology out of the box, together with people like Dave Harper and Jackie Dillon and Anne Cook. And I've forgotten where this was going, but I will quickly ramble on until I can decide where to go. So yeah, absolutely. Just speaking out, encouraging people to speak out. Now the other way, and we've talked about this already, it's in your packs. There are some groups of psychologists who are already active in doing this. So psychologists against austerity, stuff in your pack, the stuff at the back, and then we're also doing this walking the talk. Steve's idea. He said, "I'd like to do this walk." It's a mad, crazy idea between Leicester and London. Would you like to come join us for a day? I said, "What do you mean for a day? I'm going to come for the whole thing." So a whole bunch of us. How many do you think now? Millions. It's going to be like the Jarrow Marches. It is going to be like the Jarrow Marches. We're going to be walking from Leicester to London. We're going to be sleeping out. We're going to be going to food banks. We're going to be going to homeless shelters. We're going to be talking to people. We're going to be collecting vox pops. That's just a really practical way of getting out there and doing it. So that there are all these different ways in which actually we can do stuff beyond the therapy room. Okay, I'm not going to go on and talk about what Massima thought I was going to talk about, which is just working internationally, really. And I'm going to show you some lovely slides. I'm really lucky, as Massima said. I worked in the health service for 5 years. I'd actually been in the army straight after university, and then I was in the city for 5 years, and then I decided to go back and become a psychologist when I was 30. So I'd already been in the army, and through a whole series of coincidences, I ended up back in the Ministry of Defence. And I worked in the Ministry of Defence for 15 years. We started with 3 psychologists. We've ended up with 30. We started with just clinical psychologists. Now there are clinical psychologists, counselling psychologists, health psychologists, neuropsychologists, forensic psychologists. They work, or at least the clinical psychology bit works, in a very similar way to just the health service. There are the equivalents of community mental health teams, multi-professional, each one, except it's much more, the pace is much slower. Each team looks after about 10,000 people. That's all, 10,000 service people. But in that work I had some really fantastic opportunities, really. One of them was to work with a whole group of people looking at stress and psychological support for military personnel. And I ended up being the vice chair of it, and it was absolutely wonderful because it was a group of something like 34, mainly psychologists, the odd psychiatrist and chaplain and social worker, but mainly psychologists from about 20-odd different nations. Both NATO nations and the former enemy, the Partnership for Peace nations, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary. And we got together, and over a 3-year period, we actually produced a document that is now the core training in psychology, really, for young officers going through academies in how to lead psychologically, how to minimise stress, how to recognise signs of stress. So that was one piece of work. And on the back of that, there was a similar. No, there wasn't similar. There was a different group. NATO had another group of psychiatrists, just psychiatrists. The NATO Commander's Medical medical advisory committee. And they're all psychiatrists. And they met and didn't do a great deal, but it was a bit of a talking shop. They had dinner and talks and had more dinner and stuff. So we said, well, why don't we get these guys involved? So we did. So we invited them to send a representative to our group, and then they then invited me to join their group. We put on a joint conference in Brussels, which was a joint psychiatrist thing, symposium, as part of this process towards producing this document. And then I was invited to join their group, and the NATO military psychiatrists panel is now the NATO military mental health panel. And it's got psychiatrists, it's got psychologists, and it's got social workers, and it's got chaplains. And we produced some things called STANAGs, the NATO standardised agreements about how to do various stuff. One of them that we worked on was all about, again, another issue that's topical at the moment, which is about torture and the role of mental health professionals in torture, which in some countries, including the United States of America, is a bit of an issue. So putting out some clear statements about that. I've also been really privileged to take part in some other bits of work. So really, as a result of that, NATO got a whole bunch of experts together to produce guidelines on the management of disaster and major incidents. So people like David Alexander, Robert Gordon, he was the psychologist who was involved in the Piper Alpha and the Piper Alpha disaster, and Lockerbie, dealing with all the body handling. He was involved. We had other colleagues from around Europe, someone called Magda Ruza from the Impact Foundation in Netherlands. Mainly psychologists in the group. And we wrote this document between us, and it's now the NATO guidelines for dealing with disasters and major incidents. And then on the back of that, the Department of Health England actually said, well, could we rewrite it? Because at the time it was when the bird flu pandemic was all brewing. So we rewrote it as Department of Health guidelines for managing major incidents in hospitals. Other sort of bits and pieces. Through the university, as Massimo said, I set up a Veterans and Families Institute at Anglia Ruskin University because I'm doing this BPS job now. My colleague Matt Fossey is now, he's a social worker, is now running it. I'm just a visiting prof there now. But we were approached by psychologists in Ukraine very recently. The request came from the Centre for Mental Health. They'd never had a war in Ukraine. You know, they'd been part of this huge, great Soviet machine. They'd never really had a war. And so now they've got this, basically the civil war, this stuff in Donetsk and in Crimea, where actually lots of people are dying. It doesn't always make the front pages. Lots of people are dying, lots of people are injured, lots of people are becoming homeless, lots of people are becoming refugees, lots of kids are affected. And the Ukrainian psychologist just didn't have the skill set to know what to do. So they got in touch with us, and we put together a coalition of people who went over to Ukraine and did a lot of training, particularly with child psychologists, on how to help children cope with the aftermath of war. And this was drawing on particularly great expertise actually from people like Professor Bill Ewell, who's Emeritus Professor at the Institute of Psychiatry. Bill, he's worked with child victims of war and disaster right over the world, and he's set up the Children in War Foundation. So yeah, they couldn't really have anyone anyone better than that, really. And then most recently, just really through a coincidence, when I qualified, I wasn't going to be a military psychologist or a trauma psychologist or anything. A lot of us go into psychology because of our own issues, psychopathology, call it what you will. When I was a yuppie with a big company car and a big phone the size of a brick, I used to get panic attacks quite regularly. And I just thought these were phenomenologically fascinating. I think, what the heck is going on here? And that sort of was what got me interested in psychology. So I knew I was interested in anxiety generally, and so I did my training, and I did my learning disabilities placement. And it was an old institution for people with intellectual disabilities, which was just beginning the process of closure and moving into the community. Very interesting. I was given the job of assessing all their out-of-county placements. So this was in Essex, and they had people, especially young people, on out-of-county placements because really the system couldn't cope because of their challenging behaviour in places as far afield as Wales, the north of Scotland. And guess what? We found a direct proportional relationship between the severity of the challenging behaviour and the distance that these kids were being placed from their families, which was just absolutely disgraceful. Anyway, I loved the placement. I absolutely loved the placement. Didn't expect it at all. I was a psychologist for Challenging Behaviour Ward. I was doing this out-of-county placement stuff, and I was a CMHT psychologist. When I qualified, there were no adult mental health jobs going, so I went to my supervisor and said, could I come back and come and work here? He said, yeah, sure. And I did that for 2 years before moving to adult mental health. Where all this is going is that there are two psychiatrists, consultant psychiatrists. One of them was from Sri Lanka, Michael Senaratna, and the other one was from Nepal, Sudha Karki. And got on really well. They were actually both very pro-psychology. A couple of weeks ago, literally only a couple of weeks ago, I'd been to see the dentist, had a phone call, and it was Sudha. And he said, Jamie said, I gather that you are the country's expert on dealing with major incidents. I said, I'm not. I'm absolutely not. He said, I'm going out to Nepal. What can I do? What should I be doing? And yeah, so he went out to Nepal. He put together a whole system, and we basically provided the infrastructure. So Skype supervision, emails, support. Put him again in touch with Bill Yule and others. We heard today about Nimisha Patel, who can't come because she's doing valuable overseas work at the moment. Some other friends of mine who are Christians, as it happens, but they do a lot of work with people who are working for non-governmental organisations. There's just so many things that it's possible to do just outside the sort of standard career. Now, I had 5 fingers being wagged at me in the back of the room. So what I would have shown you was, it started off with a slide of a closed border crossing. In fact, it's a border crossing on the Libya-Morocco border after the recent conflict. And it ended up with an open border crossing in Africa, further down actually, in Tanzania. And in between there were slides about these various things I referred to. So I'm going to wind up there. I'm not Tanya Byron. I can't be. I will never be. I don't know if I think you want to be. But my apologies for that. But I hope I've said some of the things that you might want to say about the importance of us just getting out there, getting out of perhaps our box and onto another box, and definitely onto our said box. Thanks very much.
Hopefully we can forgive Jamie for not being Tanya Byron. Jamie is not around for the plenary this afternoon, so we have a little time for questions now. So if anything you do want to ask, please do so now, because there will not be an opportunity later.
Okay. Size 16 collar, size 11 shoes. No, go on.
Okay. Thank you for a great talk. Your honesty and openness, that was really great. One of the things we've been talking a lot about is the role of the clinical psychologist. I'll speak up. Do I need a microphone?
No, you don't. No, I can hear you.
Is adding a third pillar to the reflective practitioner, scientist practitioner to an activist practitioner. What would your thoughts on that be?
Go for it. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, because I was trained sort of pre-reflexive practitioner, just when that was coming in. I was a scientist practitioner, that was formulation, scientist practitioner, and then the reflective. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Any ideas on how you bring that into training, for example? Or?
Well, I think, where's he gone? He probably has got some ideas about how to bring it to training, because you're involved in, and I've never been involved, apart from sort of, examining people's theses and going to talk on courses and stuff about training and supervising trainees on placement.
It's interesting to say, because I think one of the challenges when you're in training is that we can teach about it, we can talk about it, and we can try and help people to develop some of the skills involved in becoming an activist. But then making that step from the theory to actually doing it is a tricky thing. What would you say, Jamie, to people who are early in their careers, who are actually wanting to make the next step out from believing in something to wanting to actually do something about it at a bigger level?
Well, I think you can, you can do it individually, and you can do it through just writing and blogging and all the things we talked about. But actually, you can do it collectively as well, and find like-minded people in your area and just chat about what the issues are and what realistically you might be able to do or want to do.
I think it's more about how we bring it into clinical psychology per se.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But that's going to be a move. That's going to be a move to a new model. That's going to be a gradual process. So, first, what would I do? I would submit an article to the excellent publication that is called Forum, and just get it out there. In the military, there's a saying. Apologies for this. Fly it up the flagpole and see if anyone salutes it. So just put it out there and see what. So.
Can I ask Jamie, just one of the things that you said, that we're all in the BPS, those are BPS members, and that's absolutely right. But one of the ways in which the BPS does have a kind of centralising role is the kind of policing of what they regard as part of the aims of the society. And historically, the BPS and fairly recently as well has had quite a narrow interpretation of what they regard as, because the aims of the society are the diffusion and advancement of psychological knowledge. And then they get extremely worried about anything that looks overtly political, even though quite a lot of the guidelines about the Charity Commission and that commission actually give quite a lot of leeway. Would that be on your agenda?
It really is. I was talking about this yesterday. I was having a meeting with the divisional chairs, not all of them, but lots of them, and special group chairs. We were talking about exactly this thing. And you're absolutely right. What's happened in the past is the BPS has been in the computer says no. You have to know that. Computer says no. The answer is no. Too difficult. Can't do it. Charity laws forbid it. No, you're absolutely right. There are ways around it. Firstly, the charity laws are much more flexible and open to interpretation than people might suggest. And secondly, actually, what the BPS could do, if it wanted to, is it could set up, it has set up actually, there's a company called BPS Publication. It could set up a company, and then all the political stuff can come through the company without in any way infringing the charitable status. But no, it is absolutely on the agenda. There's a new policy director, I haven't met her yet. She did edit my press release yesterday, so it's not a very good start. But I need to sit down. But also,
and the chief executive as well.
Well, yeah, well,
They
absolutely.
need some training, Jeremy, on the interpretation of charity work.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, absolutely. I was going to say something. Yeah. So amongst the team, the three of us, there's Dot Meal, who's vice president there. She is carrying out a review of the society's governance. This is a little bit boring, but then she is. I'm doing this member network review thing, which is a little bit boring. But what I've asked Peter Kinderman to do is to look at the whole way that we do our policy, press and PR, and sit down with the new policy director and actually to look at what have we got, is it fit for purpose, have we got enough money for it, is it properly funded, what can we say, what can't we say, so those sorts of things.
Last question, please.
Hello.
Do you have any tips or advice for aspiring psychologists, given that it's such a competitive field to get into, to get funding for?
Perseverance. Bribery. Luck. You know, the whole selection process. You know, some people. Okay, I got straight from an undergraduate course onto a master's clinical psychology course. Was the fact that I was 30, did that have anything to do with it? It probably did. Did the fact that I had lots of life experience other than psychology have anything to do with it? It probably did. Did the fact that I was male in an increasingly, overwhelmingly female profession? Oh, let me say something. Can I say something about that?
That was kind of stop you.
Yeah, so that's what people. Yeah, people are looking for. They're looking for firsts. They're looking for masters or PhDs. They're looking for huge experience, and there's lots of luck as well. And it depends on assistant psychologist jobs. As many as you can get under your belt. It's just so difficult. But keep trying. I'm mentoring a guy at the moment who's a Royal Marines major, who at a similar age to me decided to leave the Royal Marines to become a clinical psychologist. He's gone back, he's done his psychology conversion degree, he's been working as research assistant psychologist. He's just had his second application rejected. He's going to try again next year. What I was going to say was, very interesting, membership in society, just normal member grades, predominantly women. 4-to-1 ratio. Go up to qualified psychologists, it evens out actually, because a lot of women, family reasons, other reasons, career reasons, leave, equal number. Go up to the who's running all the university departments, who's running all the psychology training courses, who's running all the health service departments, they're all men. So that's wrong, that's got to change.